smush your face. Like a whale, like a whale shape.
Mainstream, old school.
It'll make me appreciate your leaving.
Too much smart.
I'll make it happen for me to go back to college.
Was coming. He knew all the details. He didn't say anything like that.
Wow. Good to say you made him.
I am happy.
And then I worked with him. I realized I couldn't. I'm not keeping on this. So not only are we in terms of just attention, yeah, they don't even know what they're doing. Only the best people. Yeah. One little thing here is okay, just to start. So I was getting, I figured, you know, so of course for 8 years. Very good. But I worry that I've already on the list. And I'm gonna be on the list. Yeah. Yeah.
You have to sing of this story. So let's just all sit down. So don't.
Yes.
Here. Right there. Yeah. Clifford. Clifford, you go here. And then you and Alex, maybe sit next to each other. You sit there.
You want me to sit there?
You have no response. Let's you guys
What?
here. And then you sit here.
Okay.
Yes, that's water. So we don't have plastic thing. It's live. So welcome everybody here to the Martin Segal Theater Center at the Graduate Center CUNY. My name is Frank Henschke. I'm the director of the Segal Center. And next to the many activities we do here, which is presenting playwrights and directors from all around the world, we are a little global theater center. People call us sometimes the Little United Nations of the theater, at least in New York. And we also publish books, plays, anthologies, but also we feel that the work of the archivist, the collection of memories, the presentation, storing, and decisions, how to do that, almost like a playwright, you know, what do you tell from the story of Vienna, like Tom Stocker did? What do you put in? Also, archivists are confronted with that, and we think it's an important field of theater studies. We encourage our students to engage with the field. As far as I know, there's not really an archive in the history of the public theater, which is stunning. How can that not be? But there are great archives. In New York Theater, there are people who work it, and we have them here with us. They are our heroes. We think they are the vineyard workers in the field of theater, and they really conserve and preserve knowledge for future generations. And this is, of course, what we at universities do. It's a transference of knowledge. We bring out a little booklet, and we can show it to you afterwards. It's $10. This is the collection, I think, of 113 archives with phone numbers and emails and description and updates. It took us a very long time. We worked on it for over a year to get it updated and say, let's take out the fax numbers if they don't exist anymore, and all these things. And we didn't have an Insta yet, but who knows? Maybe archives, you know, might do that and go on TikTok. Why not? I think it should. But the idea now is to really think about what is an archive and to listen to contemporary archivists, their works, archives that are in the very beginning. They are in archives that are established, great big ones from NYU, Lincoln Center, and of course also from individual artists like Bob Wilson. So how did people find solutions, and how do they structure materials? What is the order of things, as Michel Foucault said, you know, and so I want to thank you all for coming and taking time out on this miserable day, and thank you all for participating. It's also on HowlRound, and we would like to welcome our viewers on HowlRound and thank Vijay and Thea for being such good supporters, and thanks to Anna Sophia and Nurit and Meg for having helped to make this even possible. And the format of the evening will be, we will ask everybody to get between 5 and 7 minutes, a short insight on what their work is all about. And then we have a discussion on, you know, the new landscape we all of a sudden find ourselves in. And then we take some questions. Shouldn't be longer, like an hour, 15 minutes. And maybe we have, if we don't go over time, a little chance to have a glass of wine. So again, welcome everybody. If you have a cell phone, just double check it. I'll do the same. It should say silent. Yeah. And so Anna, you will be coming down then of this, and we start maybe with Clifford. We just go down the line. Clifford, will you start, please, and tell us a little bit about Robert Wilson's Library of Inspiration, and a brief meditation on connections.
Yeah. So am I going?
You have to click. You have to click on.
Yeah. So am I going to be standing back there? Or you?
Yeah. Or I can do it for you if you
you
tell
can
me.
do it
Yes.
for me. This is amazing. I have an assistant. That almost rarely happens. So some of this greetings. My name is Clifford Allen. I actually, until the end of 2023, was with Robert Wilson and the Watermill Center as his archivist and director of archives. I started there in 2013, September of 2013, and then was consulting for them until recently, so in the last few weeks. And now I've moved on to some other things, but I did want to share with you a little bit about one of the most significant projects that I was involved with during my tenure there, in which I think has been left in good stead and is ready for its next phase, next close-up. So next slide, please. So yeah, Bob he always talked about a living library, and when I was brought on by Deb Verhoff, my mentor in this field, or one of my mentors in this field, Bob's initial idea for what he called a library of inspiration at Watermill would be an underground library where there could be, in the mud and muck of Long Island, that could be the fertilizer for many great theatrical and performance and visual ideas. Given the situation climactically at Watermill, the decision was made to go virtual and create a relationship between the vast 8,000-piece art collection of Robert Wilson and the Watermill Center, the 10,000-volume research library that is hosted out there, and the vast archives of his productions and the works of his collaborators, as well as activities at the Watermill Center, which was founded in the early 1990s and opened to the public in 2006, and is there to this day in Watermill, suburb of, or a partition of Southampton on Shinnecock land. So what we decided to do was to bring together digitized photographs from the archive in a digital asset management system, which the institution of the Watermill Center had never had before. We also brought, we populated that with digitized imagery of Bob's productions, his various performances, the activities at Watermill, education that is ongoing at the center for the community, the benefit, which is yearly, the installations of resident artists, and try to find interconnections between all of these various factors that give us what Watermill really is, and then also eventually tie in the finding aid for the physical papers of Robert Wilson and the Watermill Center, which total now around 1,000 linear feet. Next slide, please. So this is the initial splash page. So I'm going to give you a part one and a part two in the time that I have. So this is what the Library of Inspiration looked like initially. This is the splash page that when you went to library.watermillcenter.org, you would see these various digital objects and could click through them and discover interconnections through linked metadata. So it gives you a pretty diverse array of the types of materials that are held with small, as you can see, the closeness of dots, the vertical or horizontal lines demark what type of collection something resides in. So whether it is a Watermill Center activity or a Robert Wilson production with those vertical lines for I was sitting on my patio, this guy appeared, I thought I was hallucinating. So that's basically how things did look. Next slide, please. What I always used for an introduction to this project was Christopher Knowles, because his works traverse so many categories within Watermill Center and Robert Wilson Holdings, both working on productions with Bob being the inspiration for productions of Bob's, such as Einstein on the Beach. He wrote the libretto or a large portion of the libretto for that, or dialogue Curious George, to works in the art collection, his cones, to books on Christopher Knowles, and all of those were interconnected. Next slide, please. So if you were to click on Christopher Knowles and then go through Einstein on the Beach, the idea was that you would have a synopsis of the work as well as the other participating figures, location, date, and everything such as that, and then you could follow the habit trail or the deer run throughout the archives in many different guises. So that's where we landed. Next slide, please. So there are still a fair amount of areas which needed work. The Library of Inspiration, as it stood, was not able to really support audio-visual media, and the fact of the matter is that Bob's work, as so many of yours, is audio-visual in nature. We were really only working with digitized photographs or born digital photography and digitized papers. So we've rolled out or in the process of rolling out a platform called Piction, which should allow a lot more flexibility. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you an example. It's of some of the two-dimensional things that we've been uploading into Piction. Initial splash page of more recent production. Next slide, please. And one could drill down into a letter for Queen Victoria. Next slide, please. We're still trying to flesh out metadata and get a little bit more detail, but this is promises to be a bit better and a bit more robust platform as we go forth. So, yes. So that is about it. Next slide, please. And that is.
Fantastic. So thank you so much. Clifford Allen, formerly of the Watermill Center, and then since last week with the Dia Beacon Center. So here we go. So now we go on to Alice and to Linda, and tell us about your project, please.
Would you bring up the LGBTQ? Yes. That, yeah, that's it.
LGBTQ plus Artists Archive project is actually.
Is it on your mic? Take mine.
Okay. Here we go. Oh, yeah. The LGBTQ plus Artists Archive project is a project of the Pickup Performance Company. My name is Linda Chapman. I work with Jim Nicola at New York Theater Workshop for 26 years. My partner is Lola Pashalinsky, who was one of the founding artists of Charles Ludlam's Ridiculous theatrical company. So we've got a confluence here of events that sort of led me to asking Elise for help. Elise and David Gordon, when he was still alive, spent 7 years on creating an incredible, both a digital archive, recreating works, making new work out of the old material. It's accessible, and we'll give you the links for that. So I went to Elise when she invited me to become a board member of the Pickup Company after I left the workshop. Knowing what a beautiful archive they had done, I wanted some advice about getting Lola's work together. Basically, that's where it all began. Lola had worked with David and Aine Gordon, who's our current artistic director at the Pickup Performance Company. So we had a long history between the workshop, them being usual suspects at New York Theater Workshop. Elise and I knew each other back and forth through the ages. So at any rate, we started talking about that, and it's much more difficult to garner interest in an individual, especially a performer, as opposed to a choreographer who's making new work. Actors are not always credited with being, creators. So we started talking about how we might do this, and maybe I'll turn it over to Elise from here. Is yours working?
Did you just click it on? Yeah.
Oh, sure, of course. Where? Let's take this one. There we go.
How embarrassing. Anyway, well, when Linda came to me, you can bring up davidgordon.nyc. There he is. I've been running nonprofit organizations and producing work for a very long time, and I'm pragmatic. Also with Linda at this particular seating was Mo Angelis with the 5 Lesbian Brothers, and we were having coffee, and I just looked at the situation, and I know that how difficult it is to raise money for anything. And so it occurred to me that maybe if we put it together as a group, representing a certain time and aesthetic journey, that maybe we would have a chance of getting funding and support to facilitate individual artists' archives. And when I say individual artists, I mean artists who do not have an huge institutional infrastructure behind them. I mean, the Pickup Performance Company is a small nonprofit. It's been in existence since 1978. David founded it when he was on the NEA panel. The NEA panel kept saying, you know, is that a pickup company? It was a ballet thing, and they kept saying, is that a pickup company? And like it was a bad thing, and he got really annoyed, and because that's what he does. He picked up a lot of people, did a project, and then everybody went away. And that was the model that he'd been working with for some time. He wasn't, you know, a ballet company that had contract weeks. So he decided to screw all of them. He's incorporating under the Pickup Performance Company. So that's the name has an interesting origin. Okay, and so let me just show you some things that we did. This was a long project. I brought in an amazing media artist to work with David to help to see what he wanted out there. What did he want to leave behind? How did he want to leave it behind? I mean, it was a process, and they did Skype calls from New York to Los Angeles for a series of weeks. She and I had done James Turrell's first website together, so we had worked together. She's extraordinary. Her name's Peggy Weil. Anyway, so she came back with this concept of organizing it by decades, you know, because that was the way to break up the work. So can you just go to the 1980s? Okay, so David wrote scripts, what he called scripts, which is their stories of this entire decade and what happened. And if you click one, you'll see that there's pictures and all of that, because David's theory was art and life are the same thing. So he would just tell you the whole story, okay? So you can look at this. And if you'll go back then to the last, to just 80s, yeah. Click, and scroll down. So here's the title of all the works, okay, that he did in that period. And if you click one, anyone, there's all the information about it is there, you see, and the programs from all the places where he toured. You can see David reused material in other things, and so we made the reference to this part of this was in that, and that was in this, and blah, blah, blah. And that was very important to him. And so if you go to the main page again, yeah, okay. So the most important thing is the NYPL video. If you click that, that goes to another site. It might take it, I don't know if it'll load. Huh? Okay. Anyway, that goes directly to New York Public Library for the Performing Arts website, and then you can look up David's videos. And they are accessible. You can make an appointment and go look at things. So that's what we did. It took 7 years, and also intermittently, David made a series of live performance works reusing this material. And the one other faction that is good, we had it done by a real programmer. This is not done on WordPress. This is not done on, you know, it was done by, you know, we found a cool guy who worked at home in California. And there's a search engine on this thing. And so if you like type in the matter, you know, you'll get pages of the matter references. And so he wanted things to be hooked up. He didn't want it to be isolated. So what we will hope to do with these 7 artist entities.
May I tell them who they are? Besides Lola, we have Ain Gordon, our artistic director, yes. Carmelita Tropicana, came out of the Wow Cafe, the 5 Lesbian Brothers, John Kelly, who's in our back row, artist representative, Ishmael Houston Jones, Richard Move. Is that 7? I think that's it.
So that's great. So
at any rate, those are our 7. We're not necessarily going to have this kind of a format for each of them. The idea is that we are working with each artist or artist entity to create the archive they want. For instance, like Lola's been working with the Entertainment Community Fund's Performing Arts Legacy. We're about ready to go public on a site. We've got oral histories, we have photos, we have a full resume So, you know, each artist is still alive, which is beautiful, and a big part of our philosophy is that the artist needs to tell their story, so that it's their legacy. How do they want their work to be described?
And,
Perfect.
I just have to say, too,
We won't
the
shut up.
Well, we
vision of the project is as follows: to make a legitimate archive to go into a permanent collection somewhere.
A microphone, yeah.
Make a legitimate archive that can go into a collection, you know, with the papers and all the real materials. But also, the process of digitizing can make it so that we can facilitate some sort of online public access to this artist's material, so it doesn't get lost in the neverlands of boxes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Also, we have
Wonderful.
to preserve our
So-
queer identities and our queer history, because they are trying to wipe us out. I mean, it's,
There's
yeah.
a
So
socio.
let's wait it for the discussion. Let's go on that. Why do we have the archives?
Okay.
Let's move over to right gentleman here from NYU. So Rai, tell us a little bit about your work.
Absolutely. Yep, sounds on. Hi, everyone. I'm Rye Gentleman. I am the librarian for performing arts at NYU. Librarian. I'm not an archivist. So I do want to give a shout out to the archivists at NYU, in particular Nicholas Martin, who's the archivist for the Fales collection, and Shannon O'Neill, who is the archivist for the Tamament collection, which also has a significant performing arts dimension to it. So I am not going to talk archival brass tacks, because that's not what I do. In my role, I get to do the fun work of activating the archives through curation and teaching. So I'll talk a bit about, so NYU Special Collections is where the archives are housed. They're part of the Division of Libraries, which is also the division I work for. Special Collections is a gathering of multiple different archives, the Tamament, the Fales Collection, University Archives, all kind of housed under one umbrella. The archive that I spend the most time in is the Fales Archive, and in particular the Downtown Collection. So the Downtown Collection was founded in 1994, and it aims to document the downtown, Soho, Lower East Side art scene from the 1970s through the early 1990s. I mean, it feels almost impossible. I think this is just like a list of the finding aids. And if you just look at the beginning of this list, you all, like, you know, already I'm really excited, right? Like, hello, Kathy Acker, and on and on. So all of these really wonderful collections, it's a documentary collection. So most things are organized by artist. There are some kind of broader collections, like I believe there's a queer nightlife collection and like a posters collection that might be not specific to any one artist, but you know, multiple artists advertising their shows in that scene. Some highlights of that collection for me are there's one I'm keeping till the end, so I'm trying not to say that one yet. There's Hot Peaches archives are in that collection, Split Britches archives, Jack Smith's papers, Maria Irene Fornes's papers. The collection I had the opportunity to work with most recently and most extensively was the Richard Foreman and Kate Mannheim papers collection. Papers in that title is a bit of a misnomer. There is a lot in there besides paper. It's an extensive collection. It's about 179 linear feet. It contains Richard's scrapbooks. It contains posters from the shows, those posters that used to be put up in, you know, in triplicate all over or in multiples all over the city. And it contains, you know, photographs, videos of productions, and other really interesting objects, like a series of maquettes from different productions that served as the kind of the basis for the scene design for those productions. So I was actually introduced to the Foreman collection when Helen Shaw came into Bobst, had been kind of pressing for a meeting and came into Bobst, you know, just kind of like in her really exuberant Helen Shaw way, saying, "What do you mean there are these maquettes?" So these maquettes they're very delicate, and they're kept in deep storage, and they're not really available for public use or viewing. And so she came in saying, "I've heard about these maquettes. Why can't we see these maquettes? What do you mean they're in deep storage? What's the point of an archive, right?" And so this was my introduction both to the Foreman collection and to Helen Shaw. Helen and I went on to found an ongoing annual event series called Archives on Stage, which the inaugural event of that was this past fall, which was based on the legacy of Richard Foreman. We wanted very much to digitize the maquettes for that event. That did not happen, but I'm excited to say that I am working with the head of preservation at NYU Division of Libraries to either do high-quality digital photographs of those maquettes before they go back into deep storage, or to even possibly create something like a 3D model that people can use. Yeah, yeah, which is exciting for that, because I feel like, especially with someone like Richard's work, you can't really, no one piece of documentation from that work captures the experience, and not even the range of them doesn't capture the experience, right? But if you've got the scripts and you've got the photos and you've got the videos and you've got the 3D maquettes, right? Suddenly you can start to put something together, even if you can never fully recreate it. So this led to Helen and I teaming up with Jay DeLeon, who is the Associate Director of Engagement at the Schubert Center, to create Archives on Stage. And so we created a series of 3 events around these archives and around Foreman's legacy. Foreman himself came to one of the events and was as delightfully bellicose as ever.
We were there, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Yeah, he was in.
And timely.
I know, timely. Yeah, yeah, I know. 2 minutes, great. So I wanted to. So there's one of the questions that we were asked when we came to this event was, what is the significance of these archives? Yes, of course, for scholars, and I use archives all the time in my scholarly practice, but also for artists. And so I wanted to talk about one event that was part of that series last fall that I think really showed the importance of both maintaining, of course, but also activating these archives for artists. So as part of that series of events, Jennifer Krasinski and Andrew Lampert came and talked with us, with the students at Performance Studies at Tisch, about their project. So the project was essentially that they'd come across these cards, in Richard's archives, and they just kind of had this series of kind of directives on them, what does it mean, or not directives necessarily, but observations, right, brief observations, what does it mean to think, or, and some were really there was one that just said, chicken, right? They were really kind of all over the place. But so Jennifer and Andrew found these, and they went to Richard, and they said, what do we do with these? And he said, I don't know, do what you want to with them, And they said, okay, better question maybe, what is meant to be done with them? I don't know, what are they? They're words on cards. Okay, probably you're supposed to speak them, So they kind of go through all this with Richard, and they say, okay, well, if this is what they're meant for, Richard, can we record you speaking them? And he said, yeah, only if Willem joins, right? So Willem Dafoe. So Jennifer and Andrew managed to do this recording of Willem and Richard reading, kind of alternating and reading these cards, and this becomes a piece that they put up that was kind of broadcast into the streets at the Venice Biennale. And it was just such an incredible presentation that showed how archival research can be a method for making new work, is kind of where that story wraps up. So I'd like to kind of have that also as part of the conversation.
Thank you so much, Ryan. If you see all the names scrolling, there's kind of a stunning collection. Now let's go to Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Neal. I'm the archivist at Mark Morris Dance Group. I started working there in 2017 and was there, I was project managing the creation of their archive for several years, and now I just work there as a contractor, and I'm managing a few other, or managing and consulting with a few other artist estates. But I do want to shout out Clifford Allen, because my first job out of grad school for library science was working for Clifford, and so this is really, Clifford is involved in this too. But you didn't know. But so when I started working at Mark Morris, the Mark Morris Dance Group is now there are 45 years old as of November 2025. Wow. A modern dance group that is based in New York City. Their building is across the street from the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So they started in 1980. Mark Morris, the artistic director and choreographer, is still making new work. The company received a Mellon grant in 2017, a Mellon Foundation grant to create the Mark Morris Dance Group Archive. And that's when I was hired brought on to project manage this. So the dance company was extremely fortunate to have, there was a team of I think about 10 of us, a mix of full-time and part-time staff, to sort of decide what was going to be the dance group's archive, or at least for the duration of the 3-year-long Mellon grant, to essentially process that collection, really just organize it, get a physical space in the building of the dance center to work with this material, digitize it, and put it online in this. This is the web-facing aspect of our content management system called Collective Access. And it was pretty special that we actually got to digitize our audiovisual and works on paper at the dance center for the most part, and with the staff, the archive staff who was working with this material. And the reason why that was special is because we were all in this room together at the dance center, and oftentimes with archive projects, you kind of have to send material out to be digitized, and then you receive it back, and you have to build in time to watch and look at everything, and do quality control on stuff. We got to kind of see it all getting digitized in real time, which made everybody really familiar with the work as it was, as we could see it. That kind of that workflow allowed us to be able to get really familiar with the material we were working with and start to do sort of curatorial projects with it, and also make it available to the administrative staff, to the dancers, the dance body of the dance group, and to researchers as it was made available. And then once we put this online, and I'm brushing over this as if it didn't take just all the hours, and again, a staff of 10 people. We did not just wake up one morning and it was there. Really what informed how the material was activated and how it was used, and sort of how we cataloged it, was by the users and the researchers and the internal staff and dancers. So it really is still a work in progress. I truly, the more kind of research requests that I receive, I'm like, oh, maybe we should catalog it this way so that this information is easier to find. So that's been a really interesting element to sort of having it evolve, and archives are, the whole idea of a living archive, and it's always evolving and changing. But I guess also, if we want to click on the exhibits up there, these exhibits are kind of a nice way for us to have gathered together the different kinds of material that are in a dance archive, because really the question that I get all the time is, what is in a dance archive? And I think people are, if you want, you can click on any of these. You could do Brussels years, or really the press. The company was based in Brussels for 3 years in the 80s and 90s. But to really get to see the scope of content that is in a dance archive. And really, I should just say just our dance archive, because from archive to archive, it really changes. And also, I'll just say really briefly about Collective Access. It's a relational database, and the reason why we selected it is because other organizations in the performing arts and in dance were using this platform, such as the Brooklyn Academy of Music and Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival. So you can click on any one of these, like the record for this. It's quite dynamic so that you can click around and see how different artists or performances or works or media are related to each other. And one of the bigger challenges was figuring out how to adapt the presenters' collective access sites that we were looking at, such as BAM and Jacob's Pillow, sort of adapt it for an artist's site, because there are different needs. And I can stop there, because I'm sure we'll talk more in conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Just to say, we also had Sarah Lerner with us tonight from Meredith Monk's House Foundation. They're creating the archive, and I was thinking how it will work out. But she got hit by a car with a bike. All good, we think. But here you see the life of an archivist. It can be dangerous. Life of a New Yorker. And now we have John Calhoun from the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, the great institution in this city also. John, tell us a little bit.
Okay, hi. Yes, I work for New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, specifically in the Billy Rose Theater division. We're one of 3 major divisions at the Library for the Performing Arts. There's also the Jerome Robbins Dance division, where David Gordon, Mark Morris, you can see many videos of all those dancers, many more, and the music division. The theater division actually is 94 years old at this point, although the collecting was being done in theater long before 1931 when it started. But in 1931, there was a large bequest from the David Belasco estate. David Belasco was a big, theater impresario in the early 20th century. There was a bequest, and with that bequest, a division was born, headed by George Friedley. In 1965, the Library for the Performing Arts opened at Lincoln Center, and those research collections in the performing arts moved up there. What's kind of unusual, it is unusual, it is unique in New York Public Library world, and I think in the world in general, we have both our research collections and we have a very robust circulating collection of performing arts materials at the library. So, materials that people can borrow with a library card, all related to the performing arts. It's kind of unique for archives like this to be in a public library setting. It's probably our division is among the group here closest to Rye's situation at NYU. Large institution, a lot of different archives coming into play. That's academic institution. We're a public library. We stress the public aspect of it. We're free and open to the public. Very few restrictions on accessing our collections. There are literally millions and upon millions of items in the theater division collections. You want to just click on, where did we go? The learn more about this division, just click on that. If it will move, okay. So, we have, of course, the big archival collections. We have several thousand of them. We have the New York Shakespeare Festival records. You mentioned the public theater. So to a certain extent, their archive does exist behind the doors of the Billy Rose Theater Division. It is actually our largest single collection. I can't even remember the linear feet, but it is 2,000 plus archival boxes of material. Another large collection is the Harold Prince papers. We also have the Charles Ludlam papers. There's a lot of kind of synchronicity going on here.
Charles papers.
We have Charles papers. We have Charles Ludlam. We have the Coquettes. We have Charles Bush. We have a lot of you know, people that synchronous with the fails and yes. But if you can scroll down, one of the things I want to highlight, these are just recent acquisitions, just keep on scrolling. I do want to point out that one of our more popular collections of materials is actually our clipping files. Much devalued, sometimes we feel, by actually New York Public Library. But this is one of our most, go back. One of our most requested things. There are hundreds of thousands of clipping files arranged alphabetically by artist and by title, by subject. It is a historical collection. We are no longer doing this. We really don't even have the staff. And of course, we're living in a new universe. But as a historical collection, this is invaluable. There are things here that you're not going to find online, is what we love to tell all the students that come in. Our photo files, we have major photograph collections from photography studios like White Studio, Martha Swope, Friedman Abels, but we also just have alphabetical general photo files, playbills, posters, scripts, working scripts, prompt books, and of course the Theater on Film and Tape Archive, which has several thousand recordings of theater productions, which started in 1970. So no, you cannot see the original production of Oklahoma or A Streetcar Named Desire. But it did start in 1970, several thousand strong now. In terms of, obviously we have a lot of scholars who use the collections. I would say the Theater on Film and Tape Archive is a major example of a collection that's being used by artists in the theater community every day. You know, actors, directors, you know, even, we can do some name dropping here. You think actors don't want to see the performance that came before them so as to be tainted, but you know, meanwhile, Bette Midler was definitely there looking at Carol Channing in a revival of Hello, Dolly. They do want to see it. That's the answer to that. I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm leaving out. I, like Rai, am a librarian. I do have some archival processing background, but it is very separate at NYPL. The archival processing is a separate unit. So we are basically stewards of the archival collections after they are processed. The processing is even done out in Long Island City at a separate location. So we are stewards. My job as a chief reference librarian is to connect researchers, patrons who come with our collections. Anyway, I guess that's it for now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, John. And I think we get a little insight in that really vast universe of collections. Not as vast, perhaps, as the internet, but I'm sure close to the structure of it. Many collections we haven't included. There's the Schoenberg. There is we got a mail from Jacqueline Flores with the Latinx archives with Olga Garay. They are putting up Bonnie Maranca's paper for PAJ went to I think Yale Library. So there are many others. And again, here's our little booklet with the 113 institutions in New York City. Now let's talk a little bit about archives. What is the most pressing challenge at the moment when it comes to archives? What is called for to do for you where you're wrestling? What are you wrestling with?
Resources.
Resources, yeah.
Yeah, far and away.
Space.
Yeah.
Places to put it. Nobody has any room for the paper anymore.
As I was telling some of them earlier, we're on a strict quota now. We can only accept a very small quota of new materials every year.
How much?
I can't even, I'm sorry, you put me on the spot with the number of linear feet. Last year, this fiscal year, I think we were only able to accept, maybe 10 new collections of any size. It's by linear feet, and I cannot remember
but
what the
10
number is.
10.
Yeah, that's probably on the outside. And we're talking small little collections of things. Of course, if somebody famous comes along, they'll make an exception, but.
I would say time also, I think, which is very related to resources and space. But I think sometimes there's an idea that to do anything with an archive, that it doesn't, it doesn't take much time, but it's like all time, even to come up with like a file naming convention that is consistent, that will work for not only you, but future you, and the internal staff and external, researchers and stuff, really to be able to absorb that all and think that through, or even just to digitize something takes, it takes an hour and a half to digitize an hour and a half long tape. And I think communicating all of that is challenging, and there's the time that you're working with the collection, but also how will that collection be sustained past your time, and time. So.
Yeah, especially when you're working with living artists, I think their time and your time don't always intersect. They're not on the same temporal plane. That was certainly my experience with the whirlwind of creativity that is Robert Wilson and his collaborators, and the need for processing papers related to his work, which he often mines for his own inspiration for creating new works, not just revivals, but works that kind of build on his prior creative output. And then the fact that he needed something the moment he thought of it, and where is it in processing queue, those don't always align. And I think it's obviously, at least for me, and I think for probably a lot of other people here, fascinating to work with a living artist and enjoy the collaborative aspect with respect to their process that one can get, but then the archivist's appreciation of time and the dedication to really ensuring that material is available and accessible for future generations, future projects, etc. That just operates on a very different wavelength.
Well, we're in the process of identifying individual archivists to work with each of our 7. Now, we have Vivian Stein is in the audience here as Lola's archivist, and we've been working already 2 years. We're not even half done. We've got I know it's going to be years. So now our next challenge is finding archivists for each of the other 6 entities, and then the resources to be able to pay them. So that doesn't count materials. We're talking 6-7 year projects. So there is an awful lot of resource that we've got to come up with, and finding those right people. I mean, that's also, I think, a particular challenge, because each artist needs that person who really responds to what they have done and what they want to do with it. Like Vivian and Lola, for instance, have worked hours and hours of doing oral histories, which Vivian has transcribed, and they'll be on the Performing Arts Legacy page if they will ever publish it for us. We're ready to go.
I think there's a big elephant in the room for archiving now, and that is the role of the digital age in relationship to the materials. Because my understanding, for example, at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, they say, 500 years, that's how long everything's supposed to last?
Well, it depends on.
But Linda Murray said that to me. Anyway, she's the dance curator at NYPL. And as we're saving this stuff in the papers and the boxes, I mean, David's archive, the 40 boxes went to somewhere, you know, in the NYPL universe. And none of the digital, we had to create the separate digital presence. And in fact, the deal I made with the staff at the Mellon Foundation is that we would maintain David's website for as long as we possibly could as part of the operating of the pickup company. It was just sort of a gentleman's agreement between them, because it costs money every month, you know, to maintain that site. We gave them hard drives of everything digital that we did for David's archive, and I'm sure those drives are sitting on some shelf somewhere. And I don't know that there's any use for them in the universe of the NYPL, but
I should also mention there is one of the problems with accepting new material is the huge backlog of material, and you know, there's a big digitization backlog as well.
Yes.
I mean.
Well, that's kind of why we made the deal we did, collaborating with Linda and Jen Schmidt, her predecessor, and that we would digitize everything, you know, that David wanted saved. But my question is a bigger question. It's what role does digitization play in these permanent collections? You know, not just, I mean, is it the 500 years that we're talking about, or is it, do you understand what I'm asking? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't have the answer to this.
Yeah, neither do I. I mean, it's kind of you know, I'm no expert on it. And, you know, is digital preservation, how long does that last? I mean, there's also that question.
Exactly.
But it's also, I mean, the other thing with digitization, of course, is access. It does expand your access to material, well, to the digital version of the material.
Creating the archives you were working on, what did you learn? What was kind of something that this is a good thing? This is archives should look like. What do you feel is of importance?
I think it's important for, in our particular case and experience, that we're able to process these archives with the artist, with the living artist, and so that the work is left in, whatever's left is the way they want it left. I know that, for example, David was very adamant that he didn't want, you know, some scholar coming in and interpreting his work, because the truth is that there wasn't a lot. Anyway, you either knew David or you're, but he wanted to tell the story and put it in a context where he felt comfortable. So contextualization becomes a huge issue with living artists.
And I think something that I was thinking about with the last question, and something I'm trying to do in my work as a librarian, part of my role at NYU involves working with all the different departments and programs at Tisch. And I think one thing that's not happening is that artists aren't being kind of taught from an early stage the importance of archiving their work and how to archive it, right?
Yeah.
In a way that could possibly go a long way toward alleviating some of the problems we have with getting archival collections processed and ready. And because it's not always, I mean, I know that some of our collections, like David Wojnarowicz's collection, for instance, was processed after he died, right? He didn't have a whole lot of say in it, and that's the case for so many artists.
Yeah.
And so I think another really...
I think it's more common than not, yeah,
Yes,
actually.
it is, exactly.
Yeah, meanwhile, visual artists are so very good, you know, in creating the archives, archiving it, having it cataloged. Before we come to audience question, the question would be, if a scholar comes, or a student, or someone who is interested, it's public access, as you say, what tips would you give? What do you think about this when you go to an archive like ours? How do you approach it best?
How do you, as a user, as a
Yes, let's say
as
you
a
come,
patron?
is there anything what people should know about archives people don't know?
Well, I don't know. That's anything most people don't know anything about archives. So,
What's
I
the
mean,
basics?
What do they need to know? I guess is part of the question. Usually, they just need to know. They have a very specific purpose.
Exactly.
And they just need to know what they need to know to do that. Do whatever it is. I think probably what I do is help people navigate our and it's hard because we do not have a user-friendly website. It's hard to find stuff. I help people navigate the universe of our materials, finding them. And that's really, I can give them tips about that, especially if they're working on a project that's more thematic, how they would use search terms and so forth. But I'm just thinking of it from a kind of a reference point of view. I don't know, maybe other people have something more.
Yeah.
I love the show at the Whitney, the Alvin Ailey show, which I thought was a great combination of archive and contextualizing the archives, historically, culturally. And I think the reusing of the material for me is maybe something that we haven't explored enough. I know that's something for some of the artists we've been talking about here. Certainly with David, he recreated while he was.
Well, he did it anyway. I mean,
Anyway,
he always
the recycling of the material.
he always said new and used to work.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his theme.
Yeah. Having been in the downtown theater for like almost 50 years now, seeing new work by young people, I wish there was a way of imparting some of the information that I have gathered over the years in terms of performance strategies. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel. How can you go on from this? And I don't feel like the most experimental and the most revolutionary kinds of work that I've seen over all these years. And America has produced some of the most phenomenal work. I mean, we have the example of just the people on this, that have been archived on this panel, Robert Wilson, that history of the Ludlum, that generation, Mabu Mines. How do we pass that information on to the younger artists? That to me is the big question, because I just feel like it's being taught very well. So I think the archive is the grounds for the education. We're going to need the people to teach up and out of the archives, but maybe that's a new practice that we can somehow. I just don't feel like they're getting enough, the young people, and I don't know.
And that's my hope with the fact that the Robert Wilson archives. So there are satellite collections at Columbia RBML. That Toft has a significant amount of Robert Wilson's theatrical productions on digitized video and tape, as well as audio. But and there's a few other little bits and bobs here and there. But the fact that one can, say, a resident artist can work on creating new work at the Watermill Center and engage with Robert Wilson's archive, which it used to be near here on West 29th Street for the most part, but now it's at Watermill Center, and it's in a space where Bob's art collection and these resident artist works all take place.
His chairs,
exactly, and there was just an exhibition of some of those chairs. There's a book out now on those chairs, and yeah, the fact that somebody can engage with that work and that legacy while creating or exploring aspects of their own practice, I think is really wonderful. And the hope is at Watermill that we'll have more scholarly engagement, that people interested in theater history. There was a Robert Wilson conference not long ago that Frank might want to talk about some as well, but I don't know if this is the place for that or not. But the fact that there are these inspirational threads that we hope can be picked up on in conversation with Bob's archive out there, I think that's really special and unique. I mean, it's challenging too, and I think we're all engaging in similar challenges of placement and proximity with our archive, with the archives and the artists that we work with. So.
Oh. Do you want to go ahead? I'll just quickly say that there's such an emphasis, at least I'll again speak to Mark Morris, on in our archive, what's visually facing is the performance and or like the finished product and the performing body. But there's what I try to bring people into in the archive is all of the administration and administrative documents that go into running the Mark Morris Dance Group and the Mark Morris Dance Center. A lot of
Financial records and correspondence.
Yes. And there's, you know, at the Mark Morris the Mark Morris Dance Group is also the school at the Mark Morris Dance Center. They've had classes there since the building opened in 2001. I mean, each of those classes and teachers could be like a whole archive and oral history project unto themselves. There's the Dance for Parkinson's Disease program. There's the Life on Tour. A lot of dancers, like current and former dancers, have brought in photographs that were just on, you know, behind the scenes sort of. And it was extremely helpful for me and the other archive staff to understand what the dance group was like beyond just the, you know, the photograph or video of them performing. You know, who are these people and what were their relationships like? Yeah, so all of that, and again, it kind of goes back to this thing of like what is in a dance archive, and so I try to just make people aware of there's so much else aside from images of dance, I guess. So
I just wanted to say one thing, that I'm concerned that there's an enormous lack of curiosity within the contemporary artists that are coming through the ranks, and not looking at work that's been made in the past, reinventing the wheel. I mean, I have seen some really derivative work that people don't even know is completely derivative, you know. And I personally grew up, you know, being enormously. I mean, I worked for one of my mentors worked for Saul Hurok. And most of the people that I know, younger people, don't even know who Saul Hurok is. So, you know, the legacies, you know, how do we relate the legacies to the archives so that there could be a human interest in artists that are coming and producers that are coming up through the ranks. I mean, now that we have digitization, we have enormous power to make things available.
And as a lesson also that is not overlooked or erased, like with your project, what you putting up. So if I understand right, the two big lessons also, young artists really go to the archives, go and see it. Filmmakers spend often years, you know, in the Paris libraries or others, you to see the films of of their masters that they approached, and so use the archives and also think about creating the archive your work, take it serious. And document it. You know, very often theater people don't even have a photo or a video or something.
Save it.
Save it and put it somewhere. We are over the hour mark. Maybe we go to a couple of questions. I'm sure we have. We're such a great audience here. Really, again, thank you all for coming. And what comes to your mind? I'll come up and give you the mic. Introduce yourself shortly, and then we'll go.
Thank you for your thoughts. I happen to be a documentary filmmaker, and so I'm interested in the back end of that we're not really talking about, which, among other things, is conservation, naming, and coincidentally, both Frank and I have recorded Richard Foreman. What do we do with that footage, that audio? How do we get it to you? And the other thing is, the life expectancy of CDs and DVDs are very short. A guy I know who was a staff photographer on the New York Times went back to check on 10 of his DVDs that they had saved. 9 of them were unreadable. So you can't really depend on, and then if you're going to use stuff that came back from back in the day, you have to have the computers to go with that, to read that. So how are you handling the back end, the archiving, in terms of the digital side of it?
So 2 questions. How can you send material to the archives? And then
Well,
how do you deal?
digitization, my understanding, okay, everything is on hard drives. You know, it gets transferred in whatever format, which, you know, like a DVD or a VHS or you know, all of those formats die, and there are places, contractual places, who can read these things, and they put it in a digitization format, which actually the Library for the Performing Arts demands. I mean, it has to go in a very particular format, you know, at these houses that do this transferring. I mean, I think I mean, I'm laughing also because John Kelly, who's sitting behind you, this is a very preoccupation with his work right now, is how we're going to preserve all the various formats of video, you know, everything from 16 millimeter to, you know, I mean, it's just a bunch of stuff. So, but there are these central places and houses that do this. This is what they do. And there's a whole process where you make a list and an inventory, and they send the boxes that you send to them to make the transfers. And in the case of David, and the reason I made the deal I made with the funders to not have the library have that responsibility, for us to have that responsibility, was that they could also put it in an MP4 so that David Gordon could have access to his own material, digital material. It's not the same format that goes to the library. It's a very particular, you know, technology that the library uses. So it's complicated, you know, but it has to go to hard drives. It has to go to some digital format that you have to investigate.
Yeah, and well, I think the format they think about, you know, is can then being watched over, uploaded, but you have to transfer the original material because the generations go so fast. To submit something to the NYU or New York Public Library, how does that work? Can people just send a file, a video, to say, please add this to an existing collection?
No.
Well, it depends on if it's coming from the same source as, that's one thing. If it's something entirely coming from somebody else entirely who just happens, you know, then it's like it's a new thing. It's a new collection. It has to be, you know, considered as part of, you know, the curatorial, the quota, the curatorial decision making. And there has to be a deed of gift. It's giving material to an institution like New York Public Library is not a simple process. It's, you know, there are hurdles.
Very much the same with NYU.
Yeah, I assumed it was. Yeah.
How it is.
Yeah.
So someone has a special Richard Foreman interview, would send it to you, but you could not accept it.
Well, they would have to reach out to us first, and I mean.
Yeah, so the process at NYU, if you know, I mean, you're welcome to reach out to Special Collections, which is special.collections@nyu.edu, is the email address, and you know, and the archivist there can kind of, you know, look over what you send, or, you know, not send the item, but a description of what you have, and the archivist can think about that and think if it's, you know, think about if it's worth, because it is a whole lot of like administrative. Yeah. You know, it's a whole new, it's not just part of the collection because that's under its whole own agreement and set of permissions. This would be its whole own standalone thing.
So you could reach out to the theater division, for instance, but it would have to go, we can't make the final decision.
Yeah.
It has to go to the administration and et cetera.
So it's thinkable.
There are two programs that I know through the library. One is Daisy's, you know, program where they go out and they actually tape performances.
Like theater
And then,
from a tape
yeah,
does, too.
exactly, like the,
Yeah.
which was, actually the New York Theater, recordings were amazing at the time. I mean, that whole program, when that got set up, when they started shooting Broadway shows and
Betty Corwin.
Broadway, and, I mean, so that collection the library took responsibility for. You're talking about stuff you have.
Yeah.
And you need to get it to some form of digitization that isn't in a loose, DVD tape. And there are smaller houses that also do that. You can even, I mean, there's several in Brooklyn, I know. But it's cheaper to do a mass of them, have an inventory and get a bid and get the best bid.
But a good idea is to know before, will the archive, is it interested, can we take it?
Yeah.
And maybe like in Mark Morris, where they have the exhibitions, maybe there's a pool of videos, papers one can host. One more?
I just wanted to add,
Yeah.
those DVDs, you might want to send it to one of these places to make sure that they're not readable, but anyway.
Okay, we need a list of those places and we put it on our
Well,
website.
we hope to be able to provide those, as part of our project, we'll be creating resource lists that the community can use.
Hi. My name is Aviv. I'm doing my master's at NYU in Archives and Public History. And I guess something for me that was missing when you guys were talking was the historian. And I'm kind of wondering if that's because historians are just expected to know how to use these things, or if, and don't necessarily need the outreach that, say, young artists at Tisch might, or is it because historians have kind of ceded ground in theater history to performance studies and things like that, and sort of left it out of academic history? I'm just kind of wondering why that was absent.
It's
Thank you.
really interesting. I feel like as a repository of all the things that I have seen and taken part in, that I almost see myself as becoming a historian as much as an archivist. That's what I'm talking about in terms of the teaching. I think it's about the interest in the theater history that I'm missing. It was really important to me when I was studying it, in my early years. I got a really good education in theater. I read plays from the Greeks up into everything that was happening at the time. And what goes behind that? Well, how did they come to be? That you've got to get into the culture. I don't find people interested in history, much less theater history. I think that's part of the problem of where we're at politically these days. But I think it's a great question. I love it. I love it. Let's figure it out.
Do you
I don't
mean
know.
from the archivist point of view, the history? I mean, many of the people I work with are, trained to have specialties in these areas. Like I'm a film, I also have a film higher degree in film history, cinema studies from NYU. We have architectural historians, theater historians, so is that what you're talking about, the people that are actually working with the archives, or?
If I could clarify, I guess part of this question is coming from the fact that at NYU, it feels that a lot of the theater and arts things are very cut off from the straight up history department. And so I guess the question is more about, as theater archivists, what do you see your relationship to academic historians?
That it's so much about contemporary art, but not enough looking back over history of theater. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that part of our why we're doing this is that this group of artists that we're helping to archive their work represent a very particular time in downtown gay performing arts. And they also were the people that went through the AIDS epidemic, survived the AIDS epidemic, and built their careers during the AIDS epidemic, before and after. And that is the context that we talk about when we are I mean, raising money, frankly. But it's very important to us. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that at universities, everything is separate, you know, everything. I mean, you try to collaborate between performing arts, between the dance and the theater and I mean, you know, in most universities, they say, oh yeah, we want to collaborate. And then, no, they don't want to collaborate. And so, you know, this has been this has been forever. But I think you bring up a really good point. But I think history is about context. And so it would be useful to bring in history.
It's also about where do the performing arts sit in our culture? I mean, that's my question back to you. Do the historians, so-called academic historians, even give theater, dance, performance art any credibility as being part of what they're teaching?
Yeah.
I don't think it's just, I think we're here. I think that's what our job is. I know, been making a lot of noise about the kind of work we do, trying to get people's attention. I feel there's less and less weight and importance given to performing arts because everything is online and nobody knows how to do anything in person anymore. So, you know, I throw it back to you. Let's get those historians, you know, where it's the best way to tell the story of where we've been is through performing arts as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'll say a few things like from the NYU context in particular. I think that, you know, I think that universities can be very, you know, different departments can be very insular, right? Like we're separated into departments. I can tell you that I think that like belies the interdisciplinarity that actually exists at NYU. And I can tell you, like for instance, I'm one of a series of subject specialists. So my expertise is performing arts. My office is right next door to the library, no, 2 doors down from the librarian for history, right? And as librarians, we work together a lot on different kinds of projects. I'll give just a small example, which is that I was working with a grad student actor who was doing a Chekhov and was interested in queer life in turn-of-the-century Russia. And I met with this person and we had a great conversation, and at some point I was like, you know what, you also should be talking to our librarian for you know, Eastern European and Slavic studies, right? And so like they made an appointment, but we worked together as well. So I think that, and I you know, before coming to NYU, I was working on a PhD, but I was also indexing books as a way to make money at that time. And I worked with historians who were doing theater history projects. I worked with theater people who were doing, you know, history projects of various kinds, or performance studies people. So I think there's more interdisciplinarity there than it necessarily looks like, but I totally understand how, especially somewhere like NYU, things can feel really siloed.
Yeah, I was just gonna also add a couple things that, for me personally, my journey as an archivist, like I didn't come from a theater background at all. I came from an modern and contemporary art history background, went to grad school for that, and was also deeply immersed in free jazz and experimental music, and felt like when I started working with Bob, theater was the missing piece. And for me to develop my own understanding of the contexts in which this work is created, because as well, Bob and the theater world in which that he occupied was not totally insular from the music world, from the visual art world, from the literary world. So to be able to have these things sort of in an orbit constantly, I think is really one of the most beneficial. Dropping things. One of the most beneficial parts of working in this or engaging in this field. But I also, by the same token, when I would return to talking to people that I had, say, studied art history with, or people I knew who were professors in that realm and offered Robert Wilson guest lectures and so forth, there was people were quizzical and really didn't understand what to do with it, despite my understanding of his centrality in a certain realm of American art. So I think there are at least 2 sides. It's probably more like a dodecahedron, but
yeah. Well, I would like to, coming to a close quote, the great Edouard Glissant, who also taught here, said we should look at things like in archipelagos, they are islands. of knowledges, islands of collections, but actually altogether they do form a landscape, and you can go from one island to the other. Islands can also preserve their own culture, but they are connected. And I think the big idea is really to use these archives, contribute to archives, think of your own life, of collecting also and what's important to you, but and contributing in that way. And I think what all you do is so important. It is the transfer of history, the transfer of experience, the transfer of learning that makes us different from animals, and we at the university here, is this our job? Claire Bishop is an art historian who says we should look at the history of art through performance and theater. Actually, she says it's wrong to just do culture and painting. So there are many, many events, but yes, there should be a much more engagement and also a knowledge of what has been there before, and this is why we have the archives. So if you want to get the book, it's maybe we do $5 today instead of 10. 10 already is under the price we produced it, but would be happy if you have it, and so really thank you for coming, and maybe you share a glass of wine with us, and I think a big applause for all the panelists here. Thank you. Thank you, and thanks to HowlRound for streaming us. Thank you.